Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're coming live to you from Java Roma in downtown Yellowknife. And today we're happy to produce Voices North, care of rabble.ca. We've done our beta testing, and Arlene Hache, our guest today, was here before, and we're happy to welcome her back to tell us the story about the Center for Northern Families in Yellowknife and the 20 or plus years that she's been doing this job. Welcome, Arlene. It's
Thanks,
great to
Joanne.
see you.
Thanks very much
You're very
for having
welcome.
me back again.
Well, no, the big thing is you were here for our beta testing, and now it's been good enough that we're taking it live to the internet, and you're the absolute first guest.
Oh, thank you.
So that's very special.
You can see how important social media is to the North in terms of, having voices from the community really go national.
It's awesome.
So it's really exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you see the huge impact right away.
Well, even just last week, we had Mr. Bevington in town for the C-38 bill discussion. 70 people showed up to talk about it, and
was
and it went
excellent.
out to the internet.
Yeah.
You know, it's excellent when
And
we
then
can
you
do
see
that.
the Facebook site on food security in Nunavut. It's pretty amazing.
Over 20,000 people involved now, right?
Very short period of time, and the GN reacted right away and said, since you're all talking about that, I just want you to know we care about food security issues. So the social media in the North is really finally giving a voice to people from small communities who can really get finally an answer from politicians. Yeah, so I thank you guys for getting this together.
Well,
and
it's part of outreach from
right?
Mr. Bevington's office, and
Yeah.
it's a great idea that the time has come.
Yes.
So you start telling us about 20 years at the Center of Northern Families, ma'am.
Well, it's been an exciting 2 decades.
I've known you that long.
You've known me that long. It's been exciting, tough to deal with politics, but never tough to deal with, the families and women who come to the Center for Northern Families. Most of the people who come there, have huge struggles as a result of, the impact of trauma related to residential school and colonization and, the absolutely oppressive government environment that we find ourselves in over decades here. So it's been really interesting, and across the North, I think the center has become known as a place where, there's real caring people who sort of seek out answers from government and really make people accountable and that sort of thing.
So take the individual's needs
Yeah.
and assess them, and then go to whatever option.
Yeah, so it's been a real
organization.
individual service, and unlike executive directors in other organizations, at the Center for Northern Families, I still have people who come to me for their individual kind of problems, and I send lots of them your way.
Yes,
so
you
you
do.
know how that is.
Yes, I know how that works.
So-
I got one today.
Yes,
and
you
she's
did.
taken care of.
That's good. So how important that is when you have a population of people that really are unfamiliar with how government works, don't really understand it, don't really understand the system or the forms or the paperwork and all of that. It becomes very difficult for people to manage all of that.
Well, we certainly do a lot of liaison work in that respect. People do not
Totally.
understand how the federal government operates.
No, and even if it's by the rules, they don't like or understand the rules.
No, and a lot of them have never been in a place where those type of rules even exist.
So, as
new
you
culture.
saw with the Cecilia Kell case, fortunately she pushed
Tell a little
it.
bit about that, since
That
a
was
lot of people
pretty
don't know about it.
amazing. This was a woman from Betchico who was with a non-Aboriginal person in the community and they got a house together, and he eventually got on the board of the housing association in that community and notified the government that her name should be removed from their home ownership documents, and the government did that without any legal basis whatsoever. So she lost her home and everything in it in a space of a day, because she went out to a battered women's shelter and could never get back in her own home. And so his actions were supported by the government. And so
She went high up.
she really tried to resolve it through the Canadian court system, but you had an entire court system set against that woman.
15 years later?
15 years later and 8 lawyers later, the court declined her case, not because she didn't have a case, but because they said she didn't pursue her case. Furthermore, they said if you want to take it any further, you have to cough up $40,000 to pay for the court costs. And what small community person or person from a small community has that kind of money? When you've been living on income support, unemployed, homeless as a
Definitely.
result of their actions.
Yep.
So that case she took to the United Nations, and we recently got a decision. It's the first decision against Canada for prejudice and discrimination related to an Aboriginal woman, or any woman actually. And so the United Nations recommended to Canada that they replace her home that was stolen from her, and that they compensate her for just a decade of homelessness and just torment and misery, because she sort of lost the capacity to provide her children with a home as well. And
There's always other victims.
there is many more out there. So we're hearing from Aboriginal women now with similar experiences. We just got a call from Fort Smith. So now, the door is open to what actually is happening out there for Aboriginal women and Aboriginal men, as a matter of fact. So we're really trying to gather the information and see what our next steps are. But really one of the most important recommendations from the United Nations that Cecile really cared about is the recommendation around making sure that Aboriginal women are trained and hired to provide information and support to other Aboriginal women.
Yep.
So that's one of the most important recommendations. Unfortunately, I find that almost everybody assumes that has to be tied to legal aid or the provision of legal aid or the government services.
I think so.
I hope not, but that's kind of the direction I see, the kind of the feedback coming from. And the fact is we've had court workers in the Northwest Territories and in Canada forever. So, sort of thinking that solves the problem isn't the case. Because court workers or native court workers within a government system don't have the authority or the role to advocate for, their people in their community. They used to, when it was a standalone society.
Yes, now it is.
Court workers worked for the community. Now they work for the government, and they do what the government tells them to do. That's the bottom line. And so fitting something in the government to respond to that particular recommendation from the United Nations isn't sufficient. So we want a different answer than that. We'll be looking for a different answer than that. It has to be a community-based solution for Aboriginal women, and that's what we're expecting to happen.
You've done so much work.
Oh, thank you.
And you've received some accolades. You've got the Order of Canada,
thank goodness.
Jubilee Medal.
Yes.
Wow. And you got my respect.
Oh, thank you.
In our office, because you worked so hard, Arlene.
Well,
I have watched you slave away for 20 years. I've seen you with anti-poverty rallies. I've seen you with battered women. I've seen you with alcoholics, drug-addicted people. And you've tried to help every single one of those individuals, whether it's male or female. I know you deal with women, but men come your way as well. And you've managed to steer them in the right direction.
We had a single dad who came in yesterday looking for help. So, being raised in a family where there was like home violence that was perpetrated against boys and girls, I learned early that everyone is in the same boat in that situation. So although most people think that my focus is on women, I do really tend to take a family type approach.
Your focus is on the community.
Yeah, and I really try to support men and women, and I think that's sort of been misunderstood in the past sometime. But I've said, if you want men to sort of let you know how I've helped them, there are men out there that will sort of attest to the fact that I do care about them. I was actively involved in the development of a men's program for men who use violence in the North. So I'm looking for solutions for men because everybody has a father, a son, a husband. We need to work together. Father's Day coming up shortly. Yeah, Father's Day coming up shortly. So the whole family and the community and the response to living together in a great society is what I want to see for the North. Unfortunately, I see it declining, not getting better. And
with all these cutbacks, what can we do?
Exactly. Like it's the lack of investment in the first place, and then when you see cutbacks on top of the lack of investment, then you're in deep trouble.
Scary.
So I think that's why the social media and the work that you and George Lassard are doing in terms of getting voices out there is really critical, because communities have to really take ownership of how they're going to, proceed on into the future and make their politicians accountable and the people that they have elected accountable.
Well, Mr. Bevington feels outreach is really important, and that's why we're doing this. You can have bake sales and riding association meetings and constituency meetings and all these different things, but the bottom line is if people can't talk to each other from different communities, you're not advancing any thoughts. So these discussions, open forums, are very, very important to our future. and to hopefully, keeping people like
Yeah.
yourself going at it in the
Hopefully,
north.
yeah.
Now, what are you going to do now?
I am not sure what I'm going to do, but I do know I'm going to take the summer off. I'm going to try to really kind of reflect
Gone
on what I
fishing
want to
sign
do.
on the
Going
door?
fishing, going to the bush,
Yeah.
spending time with my family, which is really
Do they
have
remember
really
who you
suffered,
are?
right? They have really suffered, and that's
Your
the-
husband's a good
the sad.
guy.
He's a really good guy. In fact, if it hadn't been for him, I wouldn't have been able to do that
No.
work over the years.
He has been
And so
very,
he's been
very
a really
supportive.
silent partner and all that, although he's not that silent if you know him. And but after the summer, I'm going to reflect in the fall and figure out what I'm going to do in the fall. But I know that it will revolve around social justice issues. I am thinking of doing some writing or assisting Aboriginal women I know who are just spectacular women to tell their story.
Oh, that'd be
And
great.
so, yeah, I'll be focused on things
Well,
like that.
Speaking of telling stories, we started doing something just the other day that's going to be like a filler on our in-between shows that we have. We're going to have archived elders telling their stories.
Wow.
And George
Very
did
good.
2 of them the other day from the Baker Center, from the
Oh,
seniors.
neat.
So this is going to be an interesting thing because the elders' stories are very, very important to the culture to be kept
Totally.
going.
Yeah,
So
that's
that's something
very
that's
good.
just, it sort of came out of the blue, and it's not like an issue, but it certainly is a great thing to have for people to watch in the north, to see an uncle, an auntie, a grandma,
Totally.
telling the family story. So we'll use that as filler
Yeah,
in an
I
outreach
actually
way.
count that investment in social media to be like one of the most important investments that can be made. So
These days, yeah.
at the end of the day, the government not only failed to invest but cut. So the investment that you and George and Dennis
Mr.
Bevington are
Bevington.
making to, this is really going to keep the social issues on the top of the agenda.
Well, what I hope is that people are out there watching and they realize that Arlene's talking about issues and they want to talk to you about something because they got something to tell you.
Yes.
Whoever that person that's sitting in that chair
Yeah.
means that we can reach out, and they may have a disability that's similar to somebody we talk to, or a medical problem with getting their drugs they need.
Yeah.
All those issues need to be talked about by each community, with each community and people, and this
Yeah.
is what I'm hoping to achieve.
Because really, why should we live with systems that don't work?
That's right.
I've
It
spent.
makes no sense.
No, and I've spent, even all this week working with a woman who has a lawyer, who is representing her in court, and she just doesn't think it's fair or just. So it's a Aboriginal woman from a small community who sort of is trying to struggle with the fact that whatever's happening, doesn't matter what the rule is, she doesn't think it's fair. And so I sort of am saying, well, that is the rule. That's kind of how it works. And so she's not buying it. So I said, okay, I finally realized you're not buying it. So I'm just going to write a letter saying this system doesn't work. So
Let's see how far that goes.
it's the important letter to say,
Yeah.
the experience of women up here, northern women and northern
Yeah.
Aboriginal people,
There are so many
is the
different
system
type of
doesn't work.
experiences for women up here that compared to down south.
Totally,
The amount of service available is minuscule compared to down south.
it's minuscule and the needs are so absolutely great.
And they're huge. They're gargantuan up here. I mean, and nobody seems to be addressing them. Now that the budget cuts have come down, it's going to be even less because the accessibility to information and getting stuff and people to even answer phones. It's
I
sad.
don't know actually. Again, I think the only way to change it or shift it or survive it is social media, making sure
Well,
people
that's what we're
understand
doing.
the rules the best they can, and then making sure they take the bull by the horns. And you've seen some real shining lights. Francis Wilkie started a Facebook site on housing issues
Yeah.
in the NWT in Nunavut. Like
Yep.
there's shining stars out there of
There's a
women and Aboriginal women in the communities that are really incredible. So they're going to be leaders on into the next 30
And these
years.
people in Nunavut right now with this
Pretty
food
amazing.
rescue, yeah.
Because their MP sniffed at the fact that
The food guy came
security
there.
wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
And then we have a few senators who sniff at the fact that food security isn't a big deal because you can fish and hunt here.
Mr. Bevington knows firsthand that we have a major food
That's
issue. We
right.
have issues right now in northern territories.
And I would
it's
invite
sad.
those senators that think, like Senator Nick Sibiston, who thinks that fishing is the bee's knees and that's all that
It's
you
okay
need
if
to
you
worry
catch
about.
some.
He needs to get his butt back up here instead of Ottawa for a while.
Where it's served on a platter,
Yeah,
right?
get rid of his salary, his triple or double dipping salary, and
Ooh,
fish.
No.
Yes.
I know. Arlene is very positive about her feelings about the North.
Yeah.
And I'm really pleased to see that you're moving into new things, hopefully writing a book,
I
because
hope
you've got
so.
100 stories to tell at least.
Well, more importantly, the women do. So if I'm writing any story, it'll be those women's stories.
Well,
So,
they want to
yeah,
tell a
it'll be
story,
excellent.
you get it out there.
Yeah.
And I know you have to head back to the center because you've got a
Okay.
bit of an
I
emergency
do.
happening
I have
there.
no idea what it is, but
I
I'll
know,
find
but
out.
they're looking for you. So
Yeah.
I thank you once again, ma'am.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure
Oh,
to see you
thanks.
again.
See you again in the fall.
Come back and tell us what you've
And they
done.
are
How many
having
fish you caught?
They are having a party for me in September. So when that happens, I'll let you know, and hopefully you could set up your.
We go live? Can we go
Arlene's
Yes,
retirement
I wanna go
party
for
live. I'll speak to
Yeah,
Mr.
of course.
Beddington
Thank
about
you.
it.
See you
Thank
again.
you, Arlene.
Thank you, George Lassard. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Voices North, completion for the afternoon of Friday. And thanks to Arlene Hache, the Center of Northern Families Director, about to retire. We wish her the very, very best of luck and look forward to seeing her in the fall with a further chapter of her story. Thanks, Arlene.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody, and enjoy the weekend.